Huckleberry Creek campfire song, hanging with the Sasquatch all night long. Leave peanut butter at your gift inside. Listen to the hoot and hollers all through the night. All through the night.
In June of 2014, a group of us returned to a spot dear to me in my memories. Elk Meadows, at the very head of Blue Creek in California's Six Rivers National Forest. We spent 12 days there, days such that 12 days in heaven could not have been better. Activity was constant, and encounters very close and personal. To date, I have completed 2 video essays relating to activity in this area. One from my 1978 encounter in the area entitled Go Road 1978 Encounter. Catchy, isn't it? And the second being Milepost 14 on the Go Road. I believe there will be one more yet to come. We shall see. The Go Road, short for Gasky-Orleans Road, was planned to run from the very northern town in California, Gasky, on Highway 199, across the coastal mountains to the heart of the Siskiyou Mountains at Orleans. In fact, the western end, from Gasky, up the Smith River to the vicinity of Dr. Rocks, was built. The eastern end, from Orleans, up the Bluff Creek drainage, across the ridge to Blue Creek, and on to Milepost 33, was also built. What was never built was the connecting link between the two. Subsequently, that area between was named a wilderness area, the only one I know of with 35 miles of paved road within its boundaries. Elk Meadows is at the very end of the eastern section and next to the Siskiyou Wilderness area. It was here we made our home for 12 days in June of 2014. The sun had not yet made its appearance, although the fire was warm and bright. Daylight promised the advent of yet another gorgeous day. I looked out from my tent where I was making preparations for today's departure to see Kathy, or at least a reasonable facsimile of an early morning version of Kathy. I reflected a moment on how fortunate I was to have such a friend. Indeed, the 3 who intended this camp are of a sort that any person would marvel at their presence. Strong, resilient, and intelligent. I had just left the fireside, noticing the paucity of available firewood in the pile. It warmed my heart to see this woman, fresh from her night's rest, with her arms totally laden with wood. Sufficient to last us, probably, for the few hours left to us here. Since Sue and Arla had left camp, Kathy had stepped forward to assume the bushway duties, while others had contented themselves with sitting on their collective butt and allowed this to happen. Dinner last night had been left entirely to her devices, though all were quickly in line when the call came that it was ready. It was Kathy who cleaned up after, and even offered to make coffee for all. I listened as Kathy approached the fire and asked those recumbent, "Have you brought in firewood yet?" "Well, no," was the response. "I've only just gotten up." "Yes, so have I. But to have a fire, we need firewood. And the standing rule is, if you come to the fire, you bring wood." Kathy then deposited her load on the depleted stack and sat to enjoy the fruits of her labor while no one moved. Bugs returned to the fire from his morning chores with an armload of wood. None other came in. Breakfast came and went. Our guests from the low country were obviously enjoying the manifestations of our hosts. This morning alone, A new rock stack had been discovered, as well as some glyphs, and there was ongoing conversation with our big guys. Deb had regaled us with her descriptions of the vocalizations she had heard that sent her back to camp post-haste. Bugs and Deanne had stayed out longer and had listened to even more of the backcountry talk, but eventually, even they had returned to camp filled with the excitement of the day. While awaiting the return of our wanderers, a small party of hikers consisting of 4 men and 2 dogs, one with his own pack, passed by camp on the road that would lead them down the mountain. A moment's conversation told me that they had hiked in over the divide from Dalton Creek. They returned mere moments later, retracing their steps to pass us again, this time in the direction of the end of the road. I assumed they were seeking the trailhead that would lead them on into the Blue Creek wilderness, an assumption that bore fruit moments later when I saw them headed back in the direction of that trail and from which they did not return. Upon the return to the fire of all 3 guests, Deb began to describe the discovery of this rock stack that was left in the vicinity. Indeed, within feet of the small structure Arla had left a few days prior. It was at this point that obstructionism reared its head. Oh, those hikers went that way. They made it. I rolled my eyes and counted to 10 slowly in order to stifle the retort that built within me. Instead, after a moment's calm, I said, "No, that is not possible. They were gone from us only long enough to have walked 100 yards or so up that road. This shrine at the grotto is quite a distance beyond that." The reply was, "Oh, they had to come in that way, didn't they? They must have made it then." I immediately and quietly rejoined, "No, they did not come in that way. They hiked in from Dalton Creek Wilderness. If they had come in by the road, it would have had to have been at night, as I have not left the vicinity of this fire since we returned from the Bigfoot Community Camp on Friday evening." While Deb was talking with me concerning the events she had been enjoying, she arose from her seat and walked toward the creek with a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked prior. Her intent was to lay them on a down log that spanned the creek. With a slight exclamation in her very best Aussie accent, she said, "Look here, what is this?" as she pointed to a tiny toy car that had been left there. Deb continued on to describe how she had been searching thrift shops since her arrival for just such items as her husband at home collected them, and she wanted to find one for him as they were not readily available in Australia. This tiny replica of a 1955 Ford Thunderbird, complete down to the portholes in the hardtop, was obviously old. The wheels and axles were missing, and it had been left behind sometime in the distant past to be found by our hosts and deposited there as a gift to our resident from down under. Again, obstructionism reared its head when I heard, "Oh, some child must have been playing with it and left it there." I looked around at this person and just shook my head a bit. We had been camped in that spot by this time for 12 days. 12 days during which no child had been nearer than 10 miles to that spot, and probably not less than 30 miles from that spot. I had a picture of that same log taken only a day earlier that showed no toy car on it. Arla had walked across that log, and there was no toy car on it then. Yet today, there it was. We finally decided that, after querying all in camp, it had appeared on Saturday evening, and this was now Sunday morning when Deb found it. As we were marveling over this find and reflecting in the joy of the discovery and all it meant, I looked up to the second log that paralleled that on which the tiny car rested, also down and spanning the small stream, to see a piece of well-weathered, grayed, and wormhole driftwood perched precariously thereon. Once again, our skeptic stated, that had to have fallen from the tree above. This time, I'm afraid I went a shade out of respect, and replied rather sharply, I regret to say, driftwood does not fall from trees. That piece of wood was placed there by a hand. Now you can argue whose hand did it, but it got there no other way. Even if the slab had been of the same type, consistent with the surrounding trees, predominantly Port Orford cedar, and green, or at least round in limb form, I would still have had serious doubts as to how it could have fallen vertically and lodged in that precarious position. This slab of driftwood was not in this spot the day prior, Saturday, as bugs had walked the log that day. Further, these two downed logs are immediately adjacent to our cooking area. The ice chest rests in the shade of the log holding the car, and access between the two is used regularly by those descending to the creek for water. I find it very humorous that in our discussions of their gifting, on multiple occasions Kathy had asked for firewood as a gift. I'm not sure. No one could be, of course. But is it possible this is Kathy's gift from them, of fuel for our fire? I find skepticism to be a healthy thing in dealing with interpreting the antics of these people, but when obstructionism and all things are attributed to some oddball chance, that is beyond being skeptical. Far beyond being of an open mind, and is counterproductive. Question everything, but be willing to accept I don't know as a possible answer. Not all things are quantifiable, indeed. With these people, most are not. But all things are qualifiable. Cling to that for now until we can learn more. The third major gift that should be noted was made to Sue, my research part on our 5-year glyph study, and my most favorite camping bud. Sue had her tent set up well away from the others, and rather in the middle of the meadow. She could not remain with us for the entire 12 days, and on the eve of her departure, she returned to her tent to find a most unusual gift on her bunk. A piece of rawhide deerskin, cut in such a way so that the hide could curl, forming what appeared to be legs on a most appealing, most beautiful little doll. I believe everyone in that camp received a gift of one kind or another. In my case, they know I have a fondness for rocks, and I have quite a collection of strikingly colored or strikingly shaped stones. This love extends back to my youth when, often, on my return from a hike, my pants pockets did not arrive home for 15 to 20 minutes after I did. It is no wonder, then, that several of those 12 evenings, I would return to my tent to find a new stone lying atop my pillow on my bunk. It was a time of great joy, and it was with great sadness that we, at last, had to load the last of our gear and point ourselves north, back towards our home.
Beat on the drum and play the kalimba. Throw another log on and make the fire bigger. Fill in the air with warm laughter and songs, hanging with the Sasquatch all night.